Shalom. This is Ron Warren with the Nuggets of the Torah. And this week's teaching is the 7th Parsha of Numbers and the 40th Parsha of the Torah itself. It's called Balak. Within the last two Parshas, we found that 5 kings or kingdoms that were anti-Semitic against Israel. And in the last Parsha, Katat, Israel, through God's providence, met and dealt with 4 of them. They were the king or the kingdom of Edom, which is recorded in Numbers chapter 20, verses 14 to 21. The king and kingdom of Arad, which is Numbers chapter 21, verses 1 and 3. The king and kingdom of Keshban. That is found in Numbers chapter 21, verses 21 and 26. And then the last one is the kingdom of Bashan. Bashan is found in Numbers chapter 21, verses 33 to 35. This Parsha deals with the 5th and the final anti-Semitic king or kingdom. It is Balak of Moab. It places the king in a class all by itself. He will be the most dangerous king of all. Why? Moses, Aaron, and Israel will not be active participants in this battle. All of it will take place behind enemy lines, and it will show the hidden workings of the Almighty in behalf of Israel. This Parsha shows quickly how very jealous God is over his people and how very faithful he is to his covenant. Numbers chapter 22, verse 1 reads, Then the Israelites traveled to the plain of Moab and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. This is where the book of Deuteronomy was spoken and written. The next move will be in the land of Israel. The theme of this Torah portion is concerned with the power of speech, and it also shows divine providence at work. When I mention the names, what comes to mind? Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, Wild Bill Hickok, Balaam. Is it the term hired gun? Between 1957 and 1963, there was a program on TV called Have Gun Will Travel, and the lead character was a man named Paladin, and he was a very educated gunfighter, and who would hire out his gun, but it would be his choice. And he had one characteristic that did not fit the normal hired gun. He would turn on his employer if he found out they were the guilty party. The hired gun has certain characteristics. The hired gun is fearless and tough. Nobody makes him quake in his boots. The hired gun has a reputation. He is always in demand, and he has very impressive credentials. He is good at what he does. He is competent, and that is how he gets his reputation. The hired gun fulfills the mission. He must get results. Why? There will be no market for his services if the word gets around that he's unable to deliver. His reputation depends on him doing the job that he was paid to do. The hired gun is under contract. He will accept any assignment if the price is right. But here's the problem. He has no loyalties. He must honor his contract, but the next contract can change it. But God could still use the hired gun to deliver his message. Who said these words in Numbers chapter 23, verse 18? God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Balaam. The test of a prophet is not that he never says anything true, but that he can catch him in major falsehoods, things he predicted that did not come to pass. Paladin's business card read, "Have gun, will travel." Now this is good, easy, could have been Balaam's business card. Balaam was a man who knew God and called him by his name, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, the name that was given in the burning bush, and he received inspiration from the Lord. Now this is a very strange thing. God redeemed and then guided his now well-established nation, but then he communicates with a Gentile prophet that was not part of that set-apart people. Balaam was a Gentile who heard directly from God, and yet there's no reason to assume that God found special favor with Balaam. There's also no reason to consider Balaam holy or righteous before God, or that his alliance was with the God of Israel. Balaam wasn't pro-Moab. He was neither nor against Israel. He was only doing the job as a hired gun, a paid professional diviner. That's a man who uses magical arts, and he had no personal agenda or evil intent. Balaam was morally neutral. The problem is, to God, there's no such thing as morally neutral. That term is a figment of a man's imaginations. For God, a person is either for or against. There's no middle ground. And Balaam was a good example of someone who was self-deceived into thinking they had a true relationship with the Almighty while trying to hurt his chosen people, Israel. A person cannot love the Father and hate his children. That person is a liar, and the truth is not in him, as recorded in 1 John chapter 2, verse 9, 11, John chapter 3, verse 15, and John chapter 4, verse 20. Consider these questions. Has God ever talked to you through a chicken? Have you ever heard the voice of the Lord from a horse? What would you do if an animal spoke to you? Well, the first reaction may be that you're hearing things. The second reaction would be that you're going crazy. The third reaction is denial. The fourth action is shock. And the final action should be to listen. If an animal ever speaks, it's best to listen, because that would be a providence of God at work. In Numbers chapter 22, verse 28 to 30, it reads, "Then the Lord opened up the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, 'What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? And Balaam answered the donkey, 'You made a fool out of me, and if I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now.' And the donkey said to Balaam, 'Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I not been in the habit of doing this to you?' 'No,' he said." Can you picture yourself being lectured on spiritual truth by your own donkey? These verses in the Torah is Torah's version of the old Mr. Ed TV show. The donkey's question shows that it did not occur to the donkey that her master had not seen what she had seen. Balaam's response in verse 29 underscores the ironicity. The donkey was standing in front of a sword drawn by the angel of the Lord, while Balaam threatens her with a sword that he doesn't even have in his hand. Balaam, in his answer no, comes off looking like a person who is confused, embarrassed, and mocked. He is so angry that he doesn't realize he's talking to his donkey. Balaam was more upset because of his humiliation by his inability to control this animal in the sight of his 2 servants and the men who summoned him. His image was tarnished, and his image concerned him. Why? Balaam was on his way to challenge the spiritually powerful Jewish nation, supported by God himself, and all of a sudden he is arguing with his donkey. Now, this must made really did a lot to install confidence in his spiritual abilities. Remember, Balaam was contracted as a hired gun by Balak because of his power of speech, and a donkey, an animal that could not speak, left him speechless to defend himself against her and God's charges. Balaam knows Israel has a powerful God, and he has been given personal instruction from this God on what his relationship is to be with Israel. A relationship of uniting with them and blessing them based on God's covenants. God makes it clear to Balaam that he has already blessed Israel, and it cannot be overturned by a man or a Gentile nation. God will never cease to see Israel as the blessed people. He will never permanently curse Israel and will oppose anyone who tries to curse his people. God tells Balaam that Israel has a glorious future because God blessed them. This covenant of Abraham is always termed to be a blessing, and the Lord is saying, from a spiritual sense, it is utterly impossible to curse that which he has blessed. No one can reverse what Adonai has determined. And from an earthly, physical sense, to curse God's people by means of attempting to harm his blessed people will bring divine retribution upon the one doing the cursing. And God's advice? Don't do it. You know, the hired gun has a final point. That hired gun will ultimately lose in his shootout with God. Today, there are many preachers and leaders who are following after the error of Balaam. They are hired guns who are after the highest salary and benefits package. They know nothing about servant leadership that the Messiah came to model as the shepherd of his sheep. Their way is the way of destruction. It is a question of motivation and integrity. One final question. Are you God's priest or a hired gun? Shalom. Until next week's episode of the Nuggets of the Torah. If this teaching has been a blessing to you, consider subscribing to this YouTube channel.